Much for that introduction, Ari. Rabbi Charlie, thanks for bringing us all together in a way, and really Elise, and to the rest of you. It's really a pleasure. It's an honor to be here with you, especially, yes, Ari, as you pointed out, Pesach this year kind of happening a little differently. I think according to the cosmos, this lines up every 13 years or something, where Passover falls out on Saturday night. So we're already in that energy, and I saw people already started putting in the chat. But before I do some formal intros and what we'll do today, what comes up for you around Pesach? Like, what are you thinking about? What Passover this year, or in general? Feel free to put it in the chat if you're able. I'm gonna sing something to you from the Passover Seder. So either you could focus on the Seder night, but put in the chat. You know, liberation and freedom. This session today, radical inclusivity and social diversity. Is it possible? The answer is yes. See you later. No. But for real, change. Change. You know, it's interesting about that. Even the Seder, kind of the stages of change. There's a shift. 1, 2. So we'll sing a little bit. Kadesh Orchatz Karpas Yachatz Magid Rochza Motzi Matzah Maror Korech Shulchan Orech Tzavon Barech Hallel Nirtzah. I'm thinking about unhealed wounds. For this year's Pesach, vaccination brings freedom. You know, for me, the song, it hits minor notes twice. It's major. I'll play it one more time and listen for it. The chords are major, but then there's 2 stages of the Seder that go minor. And this like journey of roller coasters where we hit minor, but then we get back to major. Then it goes minor, and then we get back to major. So hear it out. Try to hear where the minor notes hit. And I'll tell you what I think. I don't know who wrote the melody. If you do, please put it in the chat. I don't. I wonder if whoever wrote it, if they were thinking about these particular 2 stages being the minor notes. Kadesh Orchatz Karpas Yachatz Magid Rochza Motzi Matzah Maror Korech Shulchan Orech Tzavon Barech Hallel Nirtzah. So the Seder, you know, and as we come up and I join you today before Pesach, I'm reminded of the fact that I'm pretty sure the Pew study said that the most observed Jewish holiday for American Jewry is actually Passover. I think 70% of American Jewry hit up a Passover Seder. This year, unfortunately, it is very different. Rabbi Charlie, as you were sharing about the maror, or the unhealed, or the broken, the yachatz, the broken matzah, the broken matzah with the whole matzahs, and you know, it's a different kind of year, you know. But when I think of this world that we're living in, and I think about the maror, you know, yes, it goes down, it's minor, but our people come together on Passover. 70%. That's, I mean, I don't know what the data is. That was 2013, the Pew study. It's 2021. And, you know, and thinking through like what brings us together, I think it's the stories. I think it's the storytelling feature, the technology of stories found in the Passover Seder that I think blows, it's Judaism. I think that blows everyone's mind continuously. The young people storytelling, justice through storytelling. And it's interesting. What's the word, if you could put it in the chat, the word for story in Hebrew? I don't know if you're familiar. What you would, if someone wants to maybe unmute and just say what the word for story in Hebrew is, but it's kind of interesting about, and I love that. Mahagid is to tell. Good call. Lehagid, to tell over. Haggadah, the telling, right? Also, Gid, it's actually the Hasidim, the meta philosophers of Judaism. They say that Haggadah, Lehagid, has the word Gid, which means like a sinew or a ligament. Like there's a kind of speaking that there's deep connection. The generational, dor vador, you need the Haggadah. So I'm seeing the word sipur, yes. Lisaper, a sipur is a story. Lisaper is to tell over, but also lispor means to count. What does it mean when our stories count? And the story of Passover, it has the highs and the lows. It acknowledges slavery, acknowledges being stuck, it acknowledges the maror, it goes minor. But then in the same time, what is the same word, sipur, which means to count, that our story should count? Sapphire, sapir, that our story should also shine. And so as I share a little bit with you about my own personal story, I just give us the bracha, that the blessing that as we go into Passover, yes, there's minor notes. And one thing I just want to also say that is powerful is safun. So maror, safun, same note. And safun it means hiddenness. It's when we eat the afikomen. It is the reminder of the destruction of the temple. It's a reminder of exile, actually. So it makes sense that maror and safun would be the minor notes. But what do we do at that moment? We acknowledge it, and then we go into Barech, and we sing, and we count our blessings, and we go into Hallel, and we yearn. And I think just what Passover is, I feel very empowered by that idea. So as we embark on our journey, I just wanted to say a little bit about what we'll do. I'll share a little bit about my background, some of the work, how I got to the work that I do today. But I would really love for us to have a conversation more than anything. So I'll share a little bit at the top. And I just wanted to clarify, Ari, how much time do I have? We have until...
Usually we do, the whole program is about an hour, so I would say till about 1:30.
Okay,
but we can go a little longer if necessary, but about It's an hour total.
Okay, awesome. So friends, we're about to jump in. I'm going to share my screen. Really a pleasure to be here with you again. Do you see this where it says okay, awesome. So I put this quote from the rabbis, Hayom Katzar v'hamalacha meruba, because I think about how many Zooms there are in the world today and how many sessions you could be on and how much work there is to do, especially on Erev Pesach, right before the Chag. Thank you for being here. There is a lot of work to do. And I'll tell you that this conversation is on a generational timeline. So the urgency, just like there's a lot to do today, but there's a lot to do for the generation. And I just want us to keep that in mind. Okay. So I would also, this is just for the chat, and hopefully friends will find another opportunity, but to have like real conversations, like let's get a coffee and all of that. When you think about this topic of equity, diversity, and inclusion, racial equity, racial justice, social equity in the Jewish community, and also in the public square, broader Jewish America, broader America, the world, what comes to mind? If you wouldn't mind just throwing that in the chat, I would love to hear, just, or at least read, I guess I should say. And friends, we will get into conversations together soon. So for those of you who are just like, the chat, no, I'm not doing the chat, and you want to unmute that, we'll get to that. I see Heschel comes up. Interesting. Afro-American Jews. Amazing. Welcoming. We should be more welcoming. Open. Welcoming. Thank you. These are all great ideas. Implicit bias. Yes. There's actually a really good book called Biased. Highly recommend. It really goes into the science. It's not a bad thing to be biased. We're all biased. Don't worry about it. It's really okay. You could put your shoulders down, take a deep breath. We're all biased, but it's a good book. Well, hopefully Aria could share that with you. Sharing my Pesach food with my Christian neighbors. Ooh, yes. Jewish identity, me, smile. Strife between the movements internationally. Yes, and movements and internationally. It's interesting, like how we think about movements, social change, like movements for social change. Like Judaism is like a 3,400-year-old movement for social change to bring this idea that we all come from one, call it whatever you wanted, Hashem or anything else. Also, private chats are great. I'm seeing repair. Yes, conservative, reform, Orthodox. I love it. Like diversity, not just racial diversity, but regional, religious, political, unity in diversity. I love that, Herb. I think about like unity versus uniformity, or achidut versus achdut, or, you know, like B'nai Yisrael versus the 12 tribes, right? You know, we're like the Jewish people. Like it's a really good point. Okay, we're gonna keep moving, but this is all beautiful, beautiful wisdom. Thank you for sharing in the chat. Welcoming their stranger. There are Jews who are not like us. It's interesting, and the who's the us is also really good questions for us to think about. Every generation, right? That question of, right? Behold, one of the lines of the Seder even, Behold Dor Chayav Adam Liros is Atzmo Ki'ilu Hu Yatzah Meretz Mitzrayim, that in every generation we have an obligation to see ourselves as if we were the other, the enslaved leaving Egypt. Like us and othering is kind of relative, right? Everyone is othered somewhere in some way. We've all been in a middle school classroom or lunchroom, you know? We know, we've seen what it's like when people are included. So this is all beautiful wisdom. There are a few terms that I don't know if we'll get to all of them today, but it's just, here are some of the terms that I think about in our conversation. And through JFNA, we call these first four JEDI, Jewish Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, or Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And I just want to share some of the reasons why. I mean, for me, my reason why this work is really important to me is, yes, because I was born and raised mixed race, and I'm on the top right, and I look lighter skinned than my siblings. Yes, it's because of how I was raised and my family upbringing, and I'll share a few stories with you today. But it's also because when I think about the work of the Jewish community in the 21st century, this is about all of us, right? Whether we feel like truly whole when showing up in our spaces. And it's not just a young people thing. Like, I think there are plenty of people who don't feel entirely included when they go to shul, synagogue, or in their spaces. And there's different, so my reasons why, definitely because of just my parents and how I was raised, but also growing up in Monsey. Someone mentioned they're from Rockland, or growing up in Monsey, New York, wow, what a place to grow up. I mean, my friends and I, we did not hang out in the synagogues. Our mentors were not our rabbis or teachers. What we did is we hung out in the woods. We hung out at the 7-Eleven and the mobile gas stations. We were rebels. We were the Monsey rebels. We got ourselves into trouble, not good trouble. And honestly, like, I'm one of the lucky ones. I really mean it. My parents really, really love us. But I have friends, man, I don't know about you. I don't know what your proximity to other people's suffering has been, but Monsey is quite the crazy place. It really is. And that also is why I'm here. They sent me also, for real. So here's other reasons why. If you're not sure why, your reason why this work is important, I'll provide 5 for you, but I would love to hear why. Like, why? Why am I here? Why did Ari invite me? Why did Rabbi Charlie invite me? And I'm so glad to be in deep relationship with you, to be here with you and sharing my background. So here are a few other reasons why. Because if the Jewish community is going to organize Jewish life, I should say, or Jewish institutions, because Judaism has its own mechanisms in place, but organized Jewish life in America and in the West, this is about all of us. Yes, we have a spiritual and moral obligation. Human dignity, hopefully, is like, honestly, your number one reason why. But also, we are becoming more diverse. and racially and ethnically diverse. By 2044, America will become a majority non-white society. There's about 1 million Jewish people of color in America who are Asian American, Black or African American, and Latin American. American Jews of color come into the world. It's not a crazy idea in 3 primary ways. One is love, like my family. My parents married each other because of love or adoption. 2 is immigration. Jews are from over 70 countries worldwide. We're already a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multicultural people. American Jews did not decide that. American Jews are we're in the later part of Jewish history in this conversation. We're all over the world. We're all over the world. And 3rd is through joining the tribe, like my mom did. She converted to Judaism. So we are becoming more diverse. So this work is also really important for the generation, for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. But I just want to start with why. It's really important. Leadership development, all of us should have the language so we can hold ourselves, feel confident that we have the ability to even just participate in dialogue without not feeling guilty, not feeling shame, feeling like, oh, this is a part of me. This is mine also. This doesn't, oh, well, Isaiah, he's a Jew of color. His mom's Black, so therefore it's his topic. No, like, oh, well, yeah, my granddaughter, she is LGBTQ, like, but like, it's not for your family. No, what do you mean? Like, and all of us, religious, this, that, we should all be equipped as leaders, and we all are leaders in different ways. And then, frankly, yeah, Jewish engagement depends on it. When people say, Rabbi, how do you know it's not just a fad? Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, and everyone's talking about the last year and a half instead of thinking about hundreds of years of issues here, right? Hundreds of years. And I'll tell you, I'm one of the founders of the Jewish Youth Climate Movement. It's run by Gen Zers, by teens. And I see their leadership. They're in over 15 cities. Incredible, these teens of the Jewish Youth Climate Movement. And I promise you, when people say, well, how do you know this isn't a fad? I'm like, honestly, the young people won't let. They just won't let. It's just their number one. Equity, diversity, inclusion, they just won't show up. They're going to start millennials, my age bracket, we already started doing that. And it's rooted in all of these identity topics. Okay, so I'll just pause there. Take a deep breath before I go into a few stories here. I'm also love the chat. Really happy to keep the chat open. Friends, keep anything coming up for you. I think it's important. Okay, so Monsey. I don't know what you think about when you think about Monsey, but on the left is what I mostly think about, ultra-Orthodox Judaism. This is a picture of my family in the middle. That's my father when I was a little kid. And I joke around that Monsey is a really diverse place if you're Orthodox and Ashkenazi. Rabbi Charlie, you might have heard that joke once or twice. And it's true that Monsey is a really diverse place if you're Ashkenazi and Orthodox. There are literally 30 different sects of Orthodox Judaism in Monsey. And my family, we were a mixed bag. Half my family is Buddhist, Muslim, Methodist. My mom converted about 40 years ago. And when they first met, my father said, you don't have to convert, I love you the way you are. And my mother said, what are you talking about? I have a Jewish neshama. I have a Jewish soul. It's not up to you whether I do that or not. And, it's then that my father really met the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Chabad Rebbe. And this is kind of how I became who I am and came into the world. And here are me and my siblings. And, I'm the lightest of the 3 of us. And I each of me and my siblings have very different experiences. And I could tell you, as someone with lighter skin, in terms of Jews, I don't know, by the way, I don't call Jews white. I think that's kind of a hard thing. We need to unpack that. I don't start there. If you want to get there after 3 or 4 hours of conversations, and there's a few books that you should read before you decide that, then maybe we could get there. But I prefer to just say European American Jews. It's easier for me. Because whiteness, it's messy. I happen to actually be white. My mom is also mixed. So my mom's side of the family were Dutch and Irish, wasps, So my Jewish side is my father's side. But I'll just say that as the undercover brother or as the white sheep of my family, I experienced things differently, whether I was with my mother or my father. My whole entire life, I got a chance to explore my racial identity. Okay. So if you're, and we should talk about this stuff like identity. Like, did you go to schools? Did you grow up going to schools where people talked about identity? Like, is that a part of the curriculum? Are parents even equipped? Are we sitting in our own identities to like help other people like support their identities? Like, are the school systems? I worked at a school for 5 years. Like, how are schools even set up that like the administration versus the teachers versus and how everyone it's so there's a lot to unpack here. One or a few stories. Um, Calculator watch, familiar? Have you seen it? I don't know if it's like okay, so you're nice. Yeah. So when I was like calculator watch for me, like second grade, it was like the Apple Watch of the late 80s, early 90s. Every kid wanted a calculator watch. It was the best thing ever. And I didn't have one. And I think about this story, I mostly probably remember it because of the calculator watch. There were so many things that happened to my family, so many things that people said to me throughout my life. But basically, a little boy during the Birkat Hamazon, I went to a Haredi school. I had sidelocks, payas, until I was 10. And he leans into me and he says, "You're not Jewish." And I was like, "What?" And he says, "You can't be Jewish. How could you be Jewish? Your mom is black." And I immediately started crying, and I remember vividly. It was the middle of like the Birkat Baruch Atah, like 300 kids. It's like loud room, and the rabbi just grabs my hand, and I'm a Rothstein. I was like round 200 and gajillion for him of how many times I'm the youngest, so he had already experienced my other sibling, and he takes me to the principal's office, and the principal doesn't say anything to me, and he just hands me a calculator watch, brand new packed cellophane wrapped calculator watch, and he says, let's just keep this between me and you. Like, you don't need to tell your mother about this." And so I take the watch, I put it on my wrist, and I get home, and my mom is like, "Hey, where did you get that calculator watch?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, Rabbi so-and-so told me not to tell you that a kid said you're not Jewish because you're black, and he gave me the calculator watch." And like my mom, like, like she had done so many times, number one, took the watch back, and then went to the principal. And I remember when she took me to school, I remember like the amount of times where I would sit outside of the office and hear her negotiating in conversation back and forth with this rabbi, with a long white beard and the full the whole thing, and her just helping people shift their consciousness. Like she was down. Like a lot of people are not down. Most of us are too triggered. Most of us are just like, no, like I'm sorry, like I'm just not interested in talking to someone that so different than me, or like completely has no idea where I'm coming. Like she was down. She taught me that in a real way. Another story she told was like when a rabbi would like use the word schwarza, which is the N word basically in Yiddish. And she went over to the rabbi and said, "What are you doing? You're a rabbi. What are you doing?" And to that, the rabbi's like, "Well, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about them. I'm not talking about you, and like, and then to that, the rabbi said, "What would you do if the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, used the word schwarza?" My mother's like, "The Rebbe would never use the word schwarza." And then to that, that rabbi stopped using the word. And again, it's just like small little things, it's hard. This is all such a mess. And it's not just even about race. Again, like also Jewish identity is complex, intergenerational trauma is real. We don't talk about these things, but it's like, it's there. So like the fact there's reconciliation, it means there's relationship. The idea of shalom is this idea of shalem, going back to words like sipur, sapir, right? Shalem means whole. Shalom means joining together opposite ideas. Mechabre trei hafachim. That's what the rabbis say. Bringing together two opposites. That's what conflict resolution is, probably a better definition for shalom than pieces, or harmony is probably a better definition. Anyway, another thing my mom, my parents, my siblings we would talk about a bunch is like the Torah parsha sheets. So I think we're coming on Parshat Tzav this week, you know, where the Kohen, it's the third book of the Torah is by the rabbis, they call it Torah Kohanim, the book of the priests. I don't know what you think Moshe looked like. James Baldwin, he writes about that in Christianity, God or Jesus is white. In Islam, God or Jesus is black. And therefore, and James Baldwin said, therefore, for me, I don't know where to go. That's what he kind of said. And it's in an essay called "The Letter in a Region of My Mind." It's a cool essay that he wrote about growing up in Harlem, in the church. And so, I would get different things that would come home, and my mom would be like, "Hold on one second. Do you think Moshe or Aaron or Miriam looked more like me, or looked more like you?" Stuff like that. She would slow me down just about because I don't know, which one of we don't need to get into it right now, but let's be honest for a second. The people that we read about in the weekly Torah portion are not from Northern or Eastern or Western Europe. So there's conversation. It's just interesting. This is what I was raised with. Okay. Noticing the time, I'm going to speed up just a little, show you some pictures. Here's a picture of a gathering of Jews of color in 2008. We didn't really go by that term. We're multiracial. You'll notice actually some people who are European present or white presenting. I think the goal is living in a multiracial community. We are multiracial, so why shouldn't we be? Should we really silo the spaces? We should ask the question, is the term Jew of color even the right term? Jewish people of color, I don't know. I grew up with mixed race, multiracial, biracial, these terms, but Jew of color, do I call, I don't know, Jewish white people? Is that how people, aren't we just Jews? Isn't the idea that we should just be multiracial? That's this, and these conversations, the term JOC, Jew of color, really started shifting in the consciousness of American Jewry about 15 or 20 years ago, but 5 years ago is when it became normative almost. This was the founding of the Jews of Color Initiative, where people were really thinking about Jewish racial diversity. What does it mean to have mixed race Jews, multiracial Jews in your communities? What does it mean to see the kind of leadership that you want to kind of see? What does it mean to have representation? How are we empowering our youth? How are our educators showing up? How are our leaders showing up? What do we talk about from the pulpit? When we say us versus them, right? We're everyone at this table. We're all Jewish. We were all raised in different ways. We all come from different backgrounds, just like everybody on this call. So Zoom, we're still Zooming. So this is also some of the work that I do at JFNA. Our initiatives, what we do is really about inclusivity, about belonging. The work we do at Jewish federations, I started about just a few months ago, 10 months ago. It's coming up on a year, right after the murder of George Floyd. And we're trying to solve for some of these big questions for our generation, together with you, really together with you. And I would love to schedule another round where we could start thinking about and I also know, Ari, you told me all the combos that you had with Professor Dr. Mark Dollinger, and I think we should be reminded that the conversations around racial equity, racial justice, I'll land with this. This is my last thought for us today. And I would love to have defined for you how I really think about this word inclusivity and inclusion, but I'll pause there. But equity versus equality, I think it's important. And it's just, I just want to make sure we're on the same page as we enter into discussion. So equality would be that I wear a size 12.5 shoe and I want to gift you all with a pair of shoes. So I'm gifting you a size 12.5 shoe. I'm giving you what I have. And what you would say to me dude, what are you doing? I don't wear a size 12.5 shoe. What happens when you have a shoe that's too big or too small? You know what happens. You can't keep up. You get blisters. It's the worst. Equity is making sure that everybody has the size shoe that they need. Equality is everyone gets the same size shoe. Glasses, let's just change glasses. Wow, what's the big deal? Everyone, let's wear my glasses. What is going to happen if you don't get the exact prescription that you need? Equity and is need-based. So when we talk about social equity, not just about race, we're saying that different people in society have different journeys. We arrived here differently. The access that we had was different. And it happens to be for Black people in America, my ancestors were enslaved. They weren't even human to some people, right? And so equity is being responsive. It's need-based. And you know what's beautiful about that? Who's been focused on equity for the last 3,400 years? Yeah, the Jewish people. Equity is tzedakah. It's the same thing. Tzedakah, the word tzedakah, if I give money and it's not what someone needs, according to the rabbis, I maybe didn't fulfill the mitzvah of tzedakah. And tzedakah is not just money. It's when someone has a need. So chesed, you may have heard the word chesed, and I'm landing here. Chesed, they say, is this idea of loving kindness. It's proactive. So a version of chesed would be an able-bodied person is walking towards the door, and I hold the door for them. They don't need me to hold the door for them. I'm doing it because I'm nice. It's chesed. It's loving kindness. Tzedakah, if a person can't open the door, I'm fulfilling a mitzvah of tzedakah. It's need-based. It's not just, so that's the work of this generation, equity, right? Everyone's talking about it. And the question of, is it possible? A part of our discussion today. There's some people who don't think it's possible. Like Mashiach. Mashiach, the rabbis say, Ein Yerushalayim nifteh, Jerusalem will not be redeemed. The world will not be redeemed. Ella b'tzedakah. The only way it will happen is through equity. So l'chaim, really good to be here with you. I'll pause here. Would love any conversation.
So people are chatting questions. Usually I facilitate it just because there's 100 people or so on Zoom. It's harder to get voices in, but maybe we'll go there today. We'll see. So let's start with a little bit of a few background questions and then contemporary questions. One question was about your mother and whether she faced discrimination in her life. Where did she grow up, and tell us about her story a bit.
Yes, so my mother was born and raised in Hyde Park in Chicago. She was raised Methodist. Her father, my grandfather, their family were enslaved in America. ABC just did a docuseries on my family, The Soul of the Nation, Magruders. I'll try to send the video over. Our family, my ancestor was a slave breeder. He was, after America didn't allow the transatlantic slave trade, people started illegally breeding slaves, and my ancestor, my great-great-great-grandfather, Charles Magruder, was taken to many different places, and he bred people for work, and that's my mother's side, and their legacy in terms of Chicago and growing up in Chicago during the Civil Rights era, and Black heritage and Black culture in the 60s, and Black power, and Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam. I have cousins who are in the Nation of Islam, like my mom's side. And my mom, she felt very connected to Judaism very, very early on. I think she caught on that the Jewish people have a very distinct role to play in this generation. I think she caught on. And then my mom's mother's side, they fought in the American Revolutionary War and Civil War. The Nicholas Gibbs Historical Society, that's my other side. It's kind of wild. My mom's story is, listen, maybe there'll be books, I don't know, but her story is like not normal, just in its own right. We're all unicorns in our own right, but her story is like pretty unique, I would say. And so, yes, so that, I think that upbringing that she has of, we're really American. Like we were born and raised, and we were only possible because of America. Maybe other people in this room also feel that way. Like we're American love. Like we came into being. And the last thing I'll share on my mother's side is because the documentary came out, we came together with the Magruders. And any time you see the name Magruder, those are my cousins. There are black Magruders and white Magruders. The white Magruders were our owners. And the family reunion was a reunion of the descendants of both the white and black Magruders. And we're together.
Were you the only rabbi at this reunion? And then how does your non-Jewish part of the family interact with you, or you interact with them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I find that anyone of faith, spirituality, sacred meaning, like those are the family members I feel most connected to, because we talk about faith and God and Tanakh, the Bible. They try to be sensitive to like keep Jesus out or say God instead of Jesus. And sometimes I don't know if they're referring to God or referring to Jesus, but we're family. I'll tell you, there's a lot of drama, baggage, things that I'm not gonna say, obviously, right here, right now. But I will say that I'm the only rabbi in the crew. And when we had our reunion, like it's clear that there's a lot of intergenerational work to do. And also we do see our family as like just a reminder of humanity. Like we're not like one of my cousins, Juan Magruder, he's 85. He lives in Sawyerville, Alabama, on the land that our family was enslaved on. He purchased it after, yeah, it's not normal. I'll send you the documentary piece. And like, he's like, my blood ain't black. He's like, my spirit ain't black. He's like, what's this old black thing? It's thick Southern accent. He's like, my blood ain't black. And it's so Jewish. Like that's what, so I think, I have a chavruta. I have a study time with my cousin. We learn every Friday. Marie Magruder, she's one of the people in the documentary. With that said, my cousins, kind of a microcosm of what's going on in America, but I do have cousins who are like very avid followers of Louis Farrakhan. I've been hearing about Louis Farrakhan for my whole life. He's not a new character in my life, not a year, not two, not five. And so those cousins, like, there's love. We've had gatherings, but it's all racially charged. I mean, but that's normal for me. My whole life has been, so I don't know, but it's all weird. Like I'm, the religious piece is a thing. The colorism is a thing, right? Even with people of color, if you're biracial, if you're 100% a race, if you're like, there's all this internal racism. It's very nuanced. This is a lifelong learning journey for all of us,
What about the world of Chabad in your family? Because
yeah.
So the way I read it, I guess your dad was not religious. He certainly wasn't Chabad. He married your mom and they both joined Chabad.
So when they started like learning, they met a Chabad rabbi, and that's kind of how it all kind of kicked up. But my father, yeah, he's a Baal Tshuva. He wasn't raised religious. For both my parents, they both kind of did something radical. My father, like my uncles are not religious; they're secular. My grandmother, may her memory be for a blessing. When I told her that I was going to rabbinical school, she's an atheist. She was like, not for it. My father's mother, she was like, I give money to Israel. You're not going to make any money. Why are you becoming a rabbi? Like it wasn't, and my father, so he became, I don't know what was worse for my father's side, like that he became ultra Orthodox and Chabad, or that he married a black woman. I don't know, and for different family members, different things were I think worse, so to speak. God forbid that it's a bad.
But how was Chabad welcoming to your mom? How was that?
Yeah, actually, in terms of like inclusivity, what spaces do you see racial diversity in synagogues and schools and camps and the sort? I think there's actually probably a lot more people in terms of orthodoxy, like the Haredi ultra-Orthodox communities have a lot more people of color often because they're really intent, they're really they go all the way, and that's enough. Like the halachic lens, that's the lens. It's not a racial lens. It's like, are you Jewish or you're not Jewish? Do you keep Shabbos or do you not keep Shabbos? Like that's how certain Jews think. So, and Chabad happens to be, there's not a single group of Jews, and maybe I'm biased because of how I was raised, though I don't identify as Chabad. There's not a single group of Jews who are better community organizers and who believe in social change and believe they could change the world and lift up the Jewish people like Chabad. And so my father, like, embodying that, and then my mom joining through that lens, it makes total sense that that would be like, you know, believing in Mashiach. Like my mom's name, maiden name, Tanya Maria Robertson, and her name today is Shulamit Geula Rothstein. And Geula means redemption. It's in her name, you know? So like Mashiach, redemption, these ideas really fuse together.
Did you have any challenges at Yeshiva University, given your family background? Did you feel in any way not included, or racism, or challenged?
For pretty much any person of color, and I, again, because of my skin tone, navigate society very differently. We could tell you 150 stories of situations like, did my mom experience racism? We live in America. Like, I'm sorry, it's not our fault. It's not. Thank God for America. Where would we even be as a Jewish people? But we do live in America. And so I've had reminders my entire life. It's not in one place or another. I mean, was one institution more welcoming, less welcoming, more inclusive, less inclusive? My experience at YU, I mean, I think already as being a person who comes from multiple backgrounds, and then growing up in Monsey with like an ultra-Orthodox background, going to modern Orthodox, or like becoming modern Orthodox, was already a rebellion for me. It was already a step away from how I was raised. Like when I got to high school, I went to Kushner Yeshiva High School. You know, Jared Kushner's father started the school. And in that school, I didn't know Hatikva, like the Israeli national anthem. I get to 9th grade, I was like, I kind of know this melody, kind of don't. And I only realized in my adulthood that, yeah, ultra-Orthodox communities don't sing Hatikva. You don't know how. So it's like, in that way, when I got to YU, like, there's parts of me that I already felt like, again, insider, outsider. Like I was raised more Orthodox than the Yeshiva University mold. But I also, like, as a millennial, I'm like unapologetically millennial, like in the sense that when people say, what denomination am I went to Orthodox rabbinical school, but I say, I'm a millennial. Like, what do you mean, what denomination am I? Like, you think denominational Judaism has like helped our people? Like, yes, millennials, they're like, denominations, we're like, what? You want to put a label on me? What do you, that's not only millennials, but so for me, like the homogeneity, or for any group to say that they have the truth, I don't feel comfortable with that. But I'll say that the beauty of Yeshiva University, the thing that I think that's most powerful about the institution, is that it's not just a yeshiva or a rabbinical school. I also got my master's in social work at Yeshiva University. Yeshiva University has a business program. It has a law school. It has a medical school. It has a psychology program. It has all of these things that like actually make it a really well-rounded institution for change. And like, those are the questions I think that it also is asking for, like, oh wait, how do we like do the 21st century, you know?
Of all the places to live in America, in New York, you chose Harlem. Can you tell us about why you chose Harlem and what you do from your base in Harlem?
Yes, thanks for that question. So when my wife and I were getting married, before we got married, we were like, you know, shopping around, where are we gonna live? And I was working at Isabella Friedman and Hazon, Isabella Friedman Jewish Retreat Center, and I was leading something. And then a certain rabbi came over to me and said, you should be the rabbi in Harlem. And I said, oh. He said, yeah, you would be perfect for it. You know, you're mixed race. Like, you can, I don't know if that was like the most appropriate hire or pitch. He's like, I'll give you a stipend. I was like, well, okay. And then, you know, and I joined a fellowship. And this fellowship, he taught me a lot, honestly. It's a rabbinic entrepreneurial fellowship. And through Hillel's Office of Innovation. And that's how we got to Harlem. We were community organizing for about a year. I was going to open a storefront called Shalom Harlem, and it would be multiracial, multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-faith, honestly. And we would have like Saturday morning would be like the moment, you know, Shabbos. and we would do 8 a.m. This was my big idea, and then the pandemic hit, and I don't know what the future brings. 8 a.m. we would start with like, you know, a little meditation, a little learning, some coffee, chill. From 9 to 10:30, we start not at the early part of prayers, but at Yishtabach, like a little in. And then the main like that's earlier. And then the main service was going to be just community, a big circle, and all halachically accessible. I don't know. We're trying to play with a new model, you know, 21st of how do we engage? How do we make sure that people feel comfortable? How do we build inclusive spaces where if someone doesn't know the Hebrew, but they want to connect, if someone's not Jewish, but they want to connect, if someone's not able to come at certain hours, if someone has kids, if someone's a single parent, if someone's like thinking about all the things and building the ritual spaces and sacredness around that. And so I have a slide deck, a 3-minute pitch for Shalom Harlem. I pitched it to one donor in February of last year. So but there is the last thing I'll just say about Harlem, there's a book about the Jews of Harlem. Harlem was the 3rd largest Jewish community in the world in the 19 teens. Today, it's the fastest gentrifying area of New York City. There are about 8 Jewish institutions in Harlem currently. Harlem is right above the West Side, so the West Side is just growing. For anyone who knows the West Side, you know, in the 70s, it went up 10 blocks, Columbia University, the 3rd largest real estate owner in New York City, after like the church and the state, is Columbia University, owns like a large part of West Harlem right now. It's like completely the city where I live is just, there's construction everywhere. The whole thing is shifting. And my neighbors, like, they've been living there their whole lives. They know I'm mixed race. They see me as like, they call me Rabino, you know, there's like good energy, which means rabbi in Spanish. But there's actually good questions to be had about like, how do we organize in a responsible way? How are we really allies? How do we gentrify in a responsible way? Because gentrification is a systemic issue. It's not necessarily only up to me. So how do I do it in a way that's not just plowing down on someone else's legacy and family story? And that's been done a lot, unfortunately, even by, you know, I'm from Monsey, even by the Jewish people in different contexts. So that's a little bit.
Do you have a minion in Harlem?
Harlem, actually, there's so many different legacy stories about Harlem, you know, the Harlem Renaissance, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, the Nation of Islam, Black Hebrew Israelites. So there's actually a synagogue called Old Broadway Synagogue. It's 104 years old. It's been around for a while, and it's an Orthodox synagogue that's not associated with any of the denominations. They're like really old school Europe in their origins. They like now currently half function as a museum and half function as a minyan, and they get just break 10 guys, you know, and about 10 women, 12 women. By the meal time, by the end of the service, they have about 25 people there. And what's most unique about Old Broadway is half of the people, literally like about 50% of the group, are Black Jews. And a lot of those people joined the Jewish people or were a part of the Jewish people for there's somebody there who's been Jewish for 3 generations, 4 generations. Somebody, you know, and also a bunch of those people were Black Israelites or were a part of the Nation of Islam, and they lived in Harlem, and their family's been in Harlem so Old Broadway Synagogue is a really incredible like microcosm of also like what American Jewry, like what comes out of, what's the product of Harlem, you know, like this is 21st century Judaism. It's an example, you know.
So in our last time we have with you, let's talk about the easiest issue of this whole program: Black Lives Matters.
Nice.
So you know, there are many people in the Jewish community that perceive Black Lives Matter as something that Jews should be involved in and support. And then there are many who believe that because of things they've read about some parts of the platform, that it's anti-Israel. It may even be anti-Semitic. So I wanted to know about your interaction with BLM and your thoughts.
Yeah. First and foremost, this discussion, everything that we just talked about until now, right? If Black Lives Matter stops you from thinking about the good or the needs about all of us, everything we talked about, right? You know why? It's because it's called a wedge issue, right? In the Jewish community, Black Lives Matter is a wedge issue. It stops us, it slows us down, in my humble opinion, and prevents us from doing the work that we need to do. So anyone, we shouldn't feel like, oh, well, Black Lives Matter is anti-Semitic. By the way, we'll talk about this in just 1 second, what it actually is or isn't. And then my personal relationship, and then, you know, a note on JFNA. But the reality is that we just spoke about hundreds of years. Black Lives Matter started 6 years ago. You know what I mean? Like Charles McGruder, my ancestor, Black Lives Matter, what's that? Like, you know what I mean? With that said, it is the largest civil rights movement in American history, in world history, I don't even know. It's like something like 30 million Americans, of which there are other data points that say 45%, 35% are white people a part of the Black Lives Matter. The 3 words is a decentralized movement. Anyone could take the language. I could live in wherever I live. I want to start a chapter. I'm going to make a t-shirt. I'm going to do whatever I want. And no one stops me. It's decentralized. So it's not like there's one voice. The point that Ari is bringing up goes to the movement for Black Lives, which is, sorry if this is confusing, but that's like a hub in an organization. So the movement for Black Lives came out with language and a charter, and it happens to be that they talk about what you should invest in and divest in. And in that, they talk about Israel. And they say really, really harsh, anti-Semitic, straight up problematic, there's no 2 ways to slice it, very clearly problematic language. And we know that anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism and the conflation of these ideas, again, put Black Lives Matter to the side. This has been happening since the 60s, at least, you know, about issues of anti-Semitism, racism, white supremacy, all these topic ideas. And so what we see is that there are a lot of the big leaders in the movement who are associated with also the charter, the movement for Black Lives. And we also see critical race theory, and people, the idea of critical race theory is pretty much typecasted Jews as white, which we know isn't true. Jews are a multiracial people. We come from Europe. We might be Caucasian or whatever. And we also know that the laws of anti-Semitism are beyond like what we talk about when it comes to race. Like every country, unfortunately, right? Ethiopian Jews had to leave Ethiopia for a reason. You know what I mean? And they weren't talking in terms of color. And so when it comes to like what we see, I think, about anti-Semitism, yes, Black Lives Matter has people in it, people who are very vocal at the top, different spaces that have control, that have power. And so in that way, it is problematic, it's murky. And if it's a thing that you're like thinking about, if it slows you down, if it's like, we can't get behind that, don't get behind it. That's my attitude. This is my life. I'm not stuck to 3 words. There's a million Jews of color. There's all of the Black people who are still looking to be able to be like, again, the word equity, like Black Lives Matter or not Black Lives Matter, do the work. That's the bottom line. That feels like the most important thing to me. But in terms of your organization, I don't know, where your board or your synagogue, or, you know, and these words are not those words. There's nuance. The last thing I'll say is Hawk Newsom. Hawk Newsom is the chair of Black Lives Matter New York. And Hawk Newsom went to Touro Law School. Touro is mostly a Jewish school. He is an agitator. He's 6'5" Black man. He has a show on BET called Cop Watch, where he basically cops who are, you know, I don't know. I don't want to go too deep into the politics. You could watch it yourself. You know, and he's Instagram and Twitters and all those things. He's been on CNN and ABC, and he puts his camera on when he lives in the Bronx, and, you know, and he's outside hanging out, and all of a sudden police come. He's like, people send him videos from all over the country, and he posts them. All this like really intense, so intense. Like, I don't agree with so much of what he puts up even. How did I meet him? I met him 3 years ago around food justice when I was working at Hazon, okay? think he was like, I think he was a part of, it wasn't on my radar really. We met up in the financial district of Manhattan at a kosher restaurant a block away from the Orthodox Union. And he's wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt, and we sit down and we meet. And what do we talk about? We talk about faith. We talk about, I promise you, he talks about God, spirituality. He says his lawyers are all Jewish, that he knows about Shabbat. And he said Touro Law School. He got into the Touro Law School program. He's from the Bronx. He said that it was the Jewish community that helped him and that he's indebted to the Jewish people. And we got lunch 2 or 3 times there. And every time people would look at us sitting at the table, be like, what? And we were just like kind of, and we didn't even talk about race. We did not even talk, I promise you, like other than he's like, oh, you're a brother. You know, when I told my brother, he's like, oh, you're my brother. You're a brother. You know, it's funny, like very often Black people like see me as Black more often than Jews do, because I pass for white, I get it, but he's like, oh, your mom's Black, you're my brother, you know, like, and then that's what, and like he posted something after the Nick Cannon thing. I don't know if you remember all these like different like headlines around, you know, Black people saying anti-Semitic things. What is it? How is it? Is it different? Is it this? Well, all these things, and ignorant find all these rehabilitation. How do you do it? Cancel culture, the issues, right? And Hawk posted something on his Instagram that like was kind of defending Nick, and I have Hawk on text. I have trust with him. We're in a relationship. We know each other. We're friends. It's like we've gotten lunch a few times when it wasn't hot or crazy or dramatic or reactive or there was a crisis. We just got lunch normal. Like we got coffee, we got sushi. It was chill. It was not, you know. And I texted him. I was like, Hawk, you have to take that post. I was like, well, what are you doing? Like you can't post that. And he's like, okay, fine. And he took it down. I'm just saying, it's like interesting about relationships. It's not, I just threw a lot of different things at you about this BLM thing, but honestly, I see it, the talking about it, I see it as a distraction and a waste of time. Honestly, anti-Semitism is not a waste of time. We have to fight anti-Semitism and we have to make sure that our communities are safe and secure. And BDS is real and all those things. But when it comes to social equity, racial justice, when people want to talk about it, I'll talk about it. But I just think there's so much actual work to do that, like, you know, the people and the parts, and there's a lot, but it's real. Like Jews love holding paradox. You know what I mean? Like,
so my last question for you is just, I'm out here in Southern California. I belong to Congregation B'nai Israel of Tustin. It's a very white place, and I assume most synagogues in America, or many synagogues, are very white. We have one of our partner synagogues is Congregation Beth Shalom in Seattle, and I think they have a much more mixed community in many respects, same-sex couples and people from different backgrounds, but our synagogue is very white, and I assume many people that I'm looking at here, maybe I think Louise Sherby belongs to Town and Village, and I think they have a very different makeup but they're in New York, so I'm not. What are we supposed to do in our very white synagogue with respect to radical inclusivity and social diversity when we don't have to face it? We don't have it.
And to clarify, racial diversity. You're saying
racial
right,
diversity.
When we don't have JOCs, when we don't have Black Jews or Latin American Jews or Asian Jews, you know, or we don't like, they're just not around us, right? Like I don't even know who I would call first. Like who, you know, where are they? By the way, we're here. Like I spend my whole week, right? There are, right, the data anywhere. If you're more conservative about data, it's about like 800,000 Jewish people of color in America. If you want to be like more lenient, then, you know, you're coming up on 1.2, 1.3, 1.5 million. Like we're everywhere. That's for sure. Everywhere. And they're right outside your community. They're in your community. It's just not, and yeah, regional racial diversity is real. Like coastal, like in your region in California, there's actually a lot more racial diversity than, I don't know, think of like other states. But like, you know, in New York, there's also really high racial diversity, at least in the boroughs in the city. What I would tell people and what I would tell your synagogues, number one, inclusivity and belonging. That inclusivity and belonging. What does it mean to feel a sense of belonging? You know, you have the answers. What are the indicators that your space cultivates a sense of belonging? So putting that on your agenda and keeping it there for the next 10 years. Keep it on your board agenda, on your synagogue agenda for the next 10 years. Don't take it off your agenda. There's no checklists, friends. There's no magic bullet. There's a lot of education we need to do. There's a lot of like relationship building we need to do. There's like, how do we ally well and support other communities that we need to do, like allyship, intergroup relations. But in terms of like our spaces, inclusivity and belonging for all members of your community. Making sure that there's different sectors of belonging, right? People who have maybe disabilities. So what do you need to do for equity, right? Going back to equity, when it comes to multi-faith families, when it comes to LGBTQ families, when it comes to single parent households, when it comes to victims of different horrible things. There's so much data about like infertility. Like there's so many issues, friends. It's really sad, but like inclusivity and belonging start with like a strategy for like these sectors. There's so many. Race, yes, race. Jews of color, sure, all of us. And by the way, you know what's going to happen if you create frameworks? If you're a pulpit and your leadership, if you're bored, you're educated, you go through a long-term educational strategy, you get 5 books that you read for the year, you think about people local and your neighbors that are in the Jewish community that are awesome and experts at this, or your non-Jewish partners that are awesome and expert. You think like all of that, it's an ongoing long-term journey. And it is possible, but equity is actually not a short-term or medium-term goal. It's a long-term goal. Some say equity focus because it's hard. Disparities are going to exist, right? So and some people, you can't please everybody, right? 2 Jews, 3 opinions. This is the one Jew on an island, the synagogue I go into, and the synagogue I never step foot in, right? Why do there's 2 synagogues, like those jokes? You know, all these things about us, and like, so we're not going to be able to please everybody. But if your posture of your institution is belonging, I want to make sure that every member of my community baseline should be leaves whole, not broken. Then the institutions are broken. I shouldn't leave worse than I come in. I could tell you hundreds of stories. I'm sure you could too, right? Baseline is leave whole. That awesome would be if you left better for all members, right? And the last thing I'll say is my work is JFNA, which is the central office of Jewish federations, the 146 federations that we support, the broader Jewish community, and all of our institutions, and the public square. And what I often remind people is most Jews are in the public square, right? They're not even in the Jewish community, most Jews. Where are we? Inclusivity and belonging, the posture. And I will signal to every Jew that sits on the margins that I really mean it when I say that I want you to feel included. Every Jew on the margins, which includes some people on this call who are like, honestly, this is the only Jewish thing I feel even I want to come to. Which is a testament to what you're doing, by the way, Ari.
Well, thank you. I think what would be helpful from JFNA is actually so that each synagogue and each community doesn't recreate the wheel, is to get ideas, like send us ideas every month. Say idea of the month for your synagogue, do this or that. You know, Rochelle did email me and say, we do have people in our show, you know, in Orange County, our inclusivity or our group is interesting. We have Latin Jews coming back to Judaism. And I know our synagogue does programs, and we go out in the community and try to do tikkun olam type things. I just think we need to be reminded of being inclusive, as you just mentioned, but I think we need actual ideas. Here's the idea of the month. Here's the idea of the week. Here's something that you guys should think about. Here's how, you know, and because we tend to be complacent, and even in our own synagogue, people sit in the same seat. People come in, and I go to the right because I like the right. Some people like the left of the synagogue. It's not political. It's just they like to sit on this side. Some people, for some reason, like to sit in the sun area. I don't know why. And then we talk to the people in that area. And when we go to Kiddush, we talk to the people that we usually sit with. And there are people that come to our synagogue and we never talk to them. I mean, they're part of our synagogue, but I don't see them getting honors. I don't see them. I feel we have a lot of work to do just in our synagogue. And so if you could share ideas or have JFNA share ideas to all of us each month, that would be terrific.
You're absolutely right, Ari, about just education, by the way. Education, our theory of change says education leads to engagement, which leads to empowerment. The rabbis say it, Talmud Gadol Shemei V'Ladei Maisa, that study is so great because it leads us to action, right? And so exposure and learning and knowledge, like it really, this is true of the Torah. We repeat the Torah every year over, or some people 3 years, right? But like the idea of ongoing learning is not foreign at all to the Jewish people. And so this topic also different areas, let's keep the learning. And yes, about ideas for synagogues and toolkits and resources, I will be sure to send. And there's also Google. But yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So I wanted to wish you a happy Pesach, a healthy Pesach. I want to wish everybody a terrific holiday, and may your meals be tasty, and may you have great discussions around the table. When we come to New York, we've done 3 trips to New York through CSP. They're amazing. We're going to come to Harlem, meet you up in Harlem, Rabbi Rothstein, and maybe you could show us the shul and some people in the community.
Yes.
See what's going on up there. See you in your natural environment there in New York. And but for now, everyone be safe. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your life story and your story about your work.
Next year together, next year in Yerushalayim, next year together as a lease. But happy Passover, so much love. Chag Sameach. Thank you, everyone.
Chag Sameach, everybody. Have a great Pesach. We'll see you on the other side. Okay. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Ari. Thank you, Rabbi Charlie. Thank you, Elise. Much love, friends.